America is no longer the only country with an unquenchable thirst for oil. And as global demand for oil skyrockets, so will the price.
I was here in '86. The very first morning I was in China, I saw a sea of thousands of bicycles. 7 o'clock in the morning, making their way down the main avenue. No cars.
Once it became clear that the Chinese were going to build a consumer society, China's production of automobiles just shoots into the stratosphere.
At the end of 2009, GM sold more cars here in China than it did in the United States. That was a real psychological wake-up call for General Motors. Bicycles are off the road, and it's been replaced with the world's largest car market. In 2000, China sold less than 1 million cars. This year, the number will be over 15 million. The most brands sold in any country in the world by far. Nothing like it in the history of humanity have we seen such an explosion in demand for cars. This thing is going to run for decades.
We've never, ever seen anything like this before, because the Chinese have gone through this extraordinary rapid growth. Over 300 million have gone from abject poverty to being reasonably well off. That is the total population of the United States, and they've done it in 30 years.
Chang Ling is a new parent. She purchased a ticket to compete with 26,000 other Chinese people just to buy a license plate. This is the first step in the long process of buying a car in Shanghai, China.
The number of cars and trucks in China is increasing dramatically. There's 7 cities in China now where they have limits on the ownership of vehicles because they're such large pollution sources.
The Chinese population, as their living standards rise, they are getting more and more concerned about the air that they're breathing, the water that they're using.
People are really worried about the air quality. In January in Beijing, you felt like you could chew the air. You couldn't even see across the street.
In some cities, you have to bid to buy a license for a vehicle, and it's about $10,000 to $15,000 to just be able to register a car.
The auction will last for exactly 90 minutes. Chang Ling will have the opportunity to bid only twice. China's one-child policy created a higher ratio of men to women. As a result, young women have a higher status, and they want cars.
It's become accepted that when a young man and woman are dating, the woman will say, I'm thinking about getting married to you. Do you have an apartment already, and what kind of car do you drive?
Every Saturday, marriage markets happen in cities across China. Parents hustle to try to match their sons and daughters. And those daughters prefer young men with cars.
比方说他是硕士从美国回来的，他收入在20、30万、40、50万，他要求对方有车有房，有的，这样的有，就是车稍微上档次一点，因为他自己条件好嘛。
The first one is a promising job, and the second one is a good house to live, and the third one is a car.
Someone nicknamed BMW as Be My Wife.
So you've got a young population. If they're making around $10,000 a year, they start to think about buying a car.
我们两个都是上班的，靠赚工资来生活的，所以当然是经济实惠的最好。
要是30万，我们也要攒好多年。
That car really represents an important symbol of success in China today, because it's part of that new Chinese dream.
China will soon have more cars than the United States. In fact, the desire for new cars is so strong, Chinese people are willing to do whatever it takes to get into the driver's seat.
宝宝啊，出价，出价。 又1个月工资没有了，6万呢，7万了，8万3，对吧？已经8万0，8万1了，已经8万了，已经8万3了，哦。那快输333470333333333 3470，
三个三
3470，
确定。不对呀，不在范围，再出价，就这样，
可以出了，
快点出价，点出价。
他已经到84200了，看到没？
点出价。
出价了呀，点了呀。
坏了，
啊，结束了。啊？
但是有点遗憾呢，因为这个月肯定是比较低，我相信下个月肯定比这个月高。
If China continues to follow in America's footsteps, the only limit to its growth may be the global oil supply.
The Chinese are going to great efforts to secure future supplies of oil.
China's scouring the world for sources of oil, not just for today, but for the next 10 and 20 years. Now, even though they're making these investments, they're saying, according to our projections, that's still not enough.
If we reach a point where oil becomes scarce, or maybe not as plentiful, and we're all competing for that oil, then the people who get the oil out of the ground are going to be willing to sell it to whoever is willing to pay the most for that oil. Right now, China sits on the largest cash hoard of any country in the world. The current system is not sustainable. It works for now. Everybody gets oil now. But what about the future? How's it going to work when the supplies aren't as great as they are now?
We're going to see the world run out of oil before we run out of Chinese people ready to buy their next car. Where are we going to get the oil?
With hundreds of millions of cars hitting the road in China, there's unprecedented competition for oil, driving the price at America's pumps even higher.